Hey, welcome to another episode of GeekOutdoors.com. So today I'm going to be asking what happened to Commodore, specifically the Commodore 64. Now, I did do an earlier episode where I talked about my own history with the Commodore. If you wanted to see that, I will leave in the description area below. But today I'm going to be talking about the history and even going further about my own experiences with the Commodore. And so the Commodore computer is something that I think might be lost in modern times, because for most people, when they think about computers or even the history of computing, they're normally going to be thinking about Microsoft Windows or Apple. However, whenever the Commodore was released in 1982, both Microsoft and Apple, they didn't have a dominance like they do now. And as a matter of fact, the Commodore, if I remember correctly, it was the single best-selling personal computing device. And I think it sold like 10 to 15 million. I think it had the record. And the one model that actually was synonymous for Commodore is the Commodore 64 or C64. And it kind of has a real interesting history, because the founder of Commodore, Jack Tramiel, his son, Sam Tramiel, they actually started up Atari Corporation, and they actually were the ones who actually ran Atari, specifically Sam, whenever I had my Atari Jaguar. So there's really some interesting history there. And the Commodore was popular for many, many years. I think up all the way until 1994 when it was discontinued. And at the height of it, I think it was like near the mid 80s where there was the height of Commodore popularity. At that time, they also had their higher end Amiga. And I myself, I thought I had the Commodore 64, but I actually owned the Commodore 128, which was a step up. Now, the way that I actually discovered the Commodore was through my best friend, because before then, the only other piece of technology that I ever had exposure to was first the Atari, which I actually did own. My parents got me an Atari. And secondly, in terms of a computer, we had Apple computers at our schools so we could play number munchers. So that kind of shows you how far back that I go back when it comes to computing. And once again, computers were not something that was normally in the home. And if you did have a computer at your house, you were pretty much really cool, at least to geeks and nerds like myself. And he was the only person who had a personal computer at his home. So whenever I saw the Commodore 64, I was blown away, because I did not know what I was seeing, because I was only used to the Atari. And the games that he had on there were simply incredible. And my favorite game that me and him played was actually Bruce Lee. It was Bruce Lee and the sumo wrestler. So it was a two-player co-op, and that was so sweet. And he also had a Commodore edition of Kung Fu. And so the gaming experience in there was awesome. It had these huge floppy disks. It had a tape drive, all types of stuff, a CRT monitor. It was an experience that, you really couldn't get anywhere else. It was just like very special, because you could probably count on your hand of kids in your neighborhood that actually had a Commodore. And so for so many years, if you were a Commodore owner, then you were really cool. Later on, obviously more people got Apple IIe computers. They got more Windows or IBM PC compatible that had Windows in it. And also some people had the Atari ST. And then some special people like myself had the newer Commodore 128. And also some people had the Amiga, which is the step up over the regular Commodores. And so Amiga was actually part of Commodore. And with time, Commodore just couldn't maintain their dominance, because obviously there's other competitors, there were new technologies. And then when it came to video gaming, we had stuff like Nintendo, Sega. The 16-bit era came, and Commodore and Amiga were still very popular in Europe, especially in the UK. And so it had a much longer life than you would expect. So it had a good like 12 to 14 years running. But I think the biggest impact the Commodore actually had was in the whole history for computing and also for geeks and nerds, because whenever you experience that, you kind of felt like, you're playing in the future, especially if you're a kid, you had something extremely special that nobody else had. And you got to remember how expensive it was to get these computers. And I actually just remember carrying around my Commodore 128, or the Commodore 64 at my friend's house. They were just so heavy and bulky. That's not something that you want to carry around with you all the time. But, it's just like a badge of honor, okay? Let's just say that, you really couldn't consider yourself a nerd or a geek if you didn't have some type of Commodore at your home. And so that is my thoughts, and also a little bit of history of what happened to Commodore. If you had any of your own thoughts or maybe your own experience on either the Commodore computer or maybe the Amiga or the Atari ST, or maybe you were in the UK and you had the Spectrum, be sure to leave that in the comments area below. And as always, if you did get value out of these videos, share, like, and subscribe. Hey geeks, if you are a creative geek like me and you wanted to learn how to create content on YouTube and other places on the internet, then check out my Gold Content Creators group, where you'll get access to 30 videos plus additional content for all the creative geeks out there. And the best part of it is, all of this is free. Simply head over to the link below, check out my page, and sign up for my Gold Content Creators group. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the other side. Thanks for checking out this episode. And as always, if you like these videos, be sure to click on the subscribe button. And for full written content, audio content, and additional geek stuff, head over to geekoutdoors.com, and I'll see you outdoors on the very next episode.